Hello and welcome to the TriathlonDan YouTube channel. Welcome to a video all about my Felt IA1. More specifically, mainly the problems I have and the things I don't like about the Felt IA1. Now, I'm an amateur triathlete for those who are new to the channel. I've ridden this bike for just over a year now, so I feel like I'm in a good place to be able to review what is good and what is not so good. This might shock you, I am not in any way sponsored by, affiliated with, partnered with Felt, so I can speak as freely as I like on this bike. But that said, I'm not just gonna go out of my way to be critical about it for some YouTube views. I will give an honest reflection of the good things and the bad things about this bike. But in honesty, there are a few things that I don't really like, so I thought I might as well share them. So as I said, I bought this bike just over a year ago. Since then I've changed pretty much everything, including the colour of the frame, the wheels, the cockpit, everything pretty much, for various reasons which I'll come on to in a second. The IA1 sits just below the FRD in the Felt IA range, and it sits above the IA 14 and 16. There are some differences between the range which I'll come back to in a little while. So this is not quite the top of the range, but it is pretty up there. In terms of cost, this is actually my first positive point about the bike, so I'm going to go through the things I like and then the things I don't like, for which I had to write an actual list about. The cost. A lot of people have these bikes. I know this is only one person's opinion, so please do let me know your thoughts down below if you've got a Felt IA or if you've had one or if you're thinking of one. A lot of people have them because they are reasonably good value. Particularly a couple of years ago, you could pick up an Ultegra Di2, one of these, for about £4,500. Now that is a lot of money to spend on a bike, but compared to its competitors, it was pretty good value. Since then, unfortunately, along with everything else in the world, we've seen the cost go up a lot. So one of these is now about £6,500, but even still, I think they are reasonably good value when you're looking at the competitors. The second thing I really like about this bike, and this is relevant to the IA1 and above, is this front nose cone. Now this front nose cone here has like a little void inside it where you can put stuff, so not just snacks. Don't put snacks in there, you can't get them out. You can put your either Di2 or E-tap if you're running it, blip box or shifter box, whatever you want to call it, it fits in there. I absolutely love that because the SRAM Red E-tap blip boxes have gone through the roof value-wise. People are paying like £500–600 for them. So not having it on show in a triathlon transition is a big advantage to me. Having it inside there means it's firstly out of show so nobody can nick it. Secondly, you're not gonna knock it and break it and have to buy another one. And thirdly, it just looks cool. It just makes it a bit smarter on the front end and a bit cleaner. More room for snacks. The other thing I really like about this bike is just how they look. I know that's so individual, but this is my thoughts about this bike. They are not UCI legal, so that means that the Felt haven't had to stick to the rules about how wide the tubes can be and how much space there has to be and how wide the forks can be, all of that. It's just, you can throw away the rule book and just do what you like. And I like how big the tubes are. It looks aero, whether it is or not, I don't actually know. But to me, it looks cool, particularly when I've had it painted a specific colour. It stands out a bit. I really like it. But that does, however, lead me on to the first negative about this bike. Because the tubes are quite big and because it is just a big bike, it's quite heavy. I haven't weighed this since I swapped the front wheel, but this bike in its current guise sits at about 9.5 kilos, which is pretty heavy. I know bikes, the TT bikes, are heavier than road bikes, but bit of an issue. I'm not too worried about it, to be honest, on flat TT courses or even rolling TT courses, but I'm doing events such as Ironman Wales later this year, and it is a consideration. You might want to think about it more if you're a lighter rider. If you're 50 kilos, then a 10 kilo bike is a massive proportion of your overall weight. Whereas for somebody like me who is heavier, it's a smaller proportion, so it's less of an issue, but it is worthwhile considering if you're looking for those performance gains. Right, so a minute ago, I raved about this front nose cone, and now I'm gonna say it's not very good. Going down a little bit, the front brake and the rear brakes are integrated. So that means that they're either inside a cowling or inside the fork. The rear brake is by the bottom bracket, the front brake is obviously in the fork, and it is recessed within this cowling. That is aerodynamic, it looks cool, it's a pain in the arse to service, and when you run wide wheels, because this bike frame was introduced in around 2016, I believe, it was just before the fad of, oh, let's get really wide wheels and tyres, so there's not a great deal of clearance. Tyre clearance is okay, it's more to do with brake clearance. So to fit this front wheel on, I've had to sandpaper down the brake pads and unscrew the cowling a little bit so it sits a couple of millimetres further out, just so I can back the brakes further out and mess around with the washers and stuff on the inside. There's basically not an awful lot of space to play with. It's not so much of an issue if your wheels aren't that wide, but if you're using more modern, wider wheels, it is worthwhile considering because you don't want your brakes rubbing. The rear brake, I just removed the rear aero cover under the bottom bracket. Yes, a slight aero penalty, but a bigger penalty is having your brake blocks rub your wheels. So I went for the easier one of the two. Back to the frame. Why is there only one bottle mount on the frame? There's only one mount on the seat tube. There is not a mount on the down tube. Now I know there's aerodynamic penalties when you're running bottles on frames, but for when I do triathlons, when you're in the aero position or you're picking a bottle up from an aid station, you want to be able to put it somewhere, and to have to reach back to that bottle mount there is a bit of a faff. You've got to sit up really in order to do it. It's more of an aero penalty being there than it is on the down tube. I just don't know why there isn't a bottle mount on the down tube. It makes no sense to me, but I'm not going to go drilling holes in the carbon frame to do it, but that's the situation. I hope you're not very thirsty. So moving towards the back of the bike, in line with the frame's theme of being thick, wide tubes, the seat post is big. Yes, it looks good, it might be aerodynamic, however, it does come with a couple of problems. Firstly, the adjustment method is a bolt on the side of the seat post, so it means you adjust the bolt either side, it slides up and down, it tightens in well, I like that, but it means that there's a channel in the middle of the seat post, and that's okay, but you have like a little rubber or plastic infill into that channel. If you want to change your seat post height, let's say you're raising your saddle a little bit, well, you need to find some more of that plastic from somewhere and like wedge it in like I've done there, and it just means that it's not quite very aesthetically pleasing. You've got a random little bit of plastic stuck in there. Unless you go and buy a whole new strip, if you're raising your saddle, you're always going to have that problem. If you're dropping your saddle, it's not so much of an issue because you're having to cut it, but basically that rubber insert won't go into the frame, so you're always having to trim it. And then there are the obvious issues of trying to run a rear light, and I know a lot of TT bikes have got big seat posts, but this is exceptionally large. I just have to end up gaffer taping a light on, to be honest. And then again, sticking with hydration, to get a behind the saddle bottle mount on here is really difficult. I run my saddle about halfway forward, so not all the way, but even still, to get a bracket on behind there is really hard. The seat post sticks out quite far to the back and it just gets in the way. I've had to do like a custom, basically bent an old mount I had in order to get a bottom mount behind the saddle. Not ideal. And then moving further towards the back of the bike, the dropouts, so where the rear wheel goes onto the frame. A lot of bikes, mostly road bikes, and some TT bikes actually, will have vertical dropouts. So you drop the frame on top of the wheel and that is the position it's in. With horizontal dropouts, these are more common on track bikes, you can move the wheel forward and back. Sounds great. Actually, it isn't, because unless your skewer is really tight, your wheel can slip. And that doesn't just mean that it's not in the optimum position. If one side slips, it throws your gear indexing out. If it slips a little bit too far forward, the tyre rubs the frame. So you're going to have to come to a stop because your tyre is going to rub your frame away, and it's pretty hard to pedal. It's just a constant worry of mine. I'm not the most powerful rider in the world, but even when I get out the saddle, or I'm going up a hill, it's constantly in my mind, ooh, what if I pull this wheel over when it tips to the side a little bit or comes forward? I'm going to have to stop and sort it out. A bit of a worry at all times, but I try and deal with it by doing the skewer up really tight, but a worry. But the biggest issue for me with this bike is with the front end, and I'm going to try and break this down and explain this in a way that a human might understand, because I think I know what I mean, but I'm trying to get it across is another word. So from the frame up to the base bar, the Felt IA1 and above comes with this integrated nose cone, which bolts onto the Felt's proprietary base bar, that carbon base bar, and then stem and extensions and all that. The lower models, the IA16, IA14 and so on, don't come with a nose cone, come with an aluminium base bar. And you might think, oh, that's a downgrade. Actually, I think it's the other way around. So this base bar is carbon, it's great. So this stem bolts to the base bar and bolts to the nose cone. You can't get a different length stem. Felt do sell a slightly longer stem for this, but they're always out of stock, and when they are in stock, they're about £250. That is incredibly expensive for a stem. I can't bring myself to spend much money on a stem. So you can see that I've had to have some adapter plates sent to extend my reach a little bit. I know that's not going to be a problem if the reach is fine for you on the bike, but for me, time trial and triathlon bikes are all about adjustability, and if you don't have that adjustability, then that's a massive, massive issue, and that for me is what is wrong with this bike. So moving up from the stem now, let's go to the base bar. There are two widths where you can mount the stack on. Great. However, this is the massive problem. The bolt spacing between the holes and on the stack is really narrow. It's about 10 or 12 millimeters, something like that. And that's really different to like the industry standard. So if you compare that to any other time trial bike, most of the time they're having a lot wider bolt spacing. And why is that an issue? Well, it means if you're trying to get some angle on your stack, as is the more common and fashionable TT positions at the minute, you really struggle to find any spaces that actually fit and work. I've tried multiple off-the-shelf options. I've tried a custom-made spacer from a company, and they just don't work as well. It was partially to do with the spacer that was made up, but because these bolts are so narrow, it doesn't give you much platform to be able to use, and it's just a massive pain to try and find anything. Now, these angled spacers I have on here do fit onto the base bar, but the only way they fit because of the bolt spacing is because on the angled stack spacer, there are 2 bolt holes. Well, because these ones are so narrow on the base bar, those 2 bolts actually fit into one of the slots rather than having one in each, and it works, but it does make it a little bit of play, and to me there's a lot of force being exerted leaning forward on like a little tiny space here, and it just worries me. I just don't think it is suitable for adjustment really. It's not an issue if you don't want to change the angle on the stack, but if you do, I think you're going to come across a problem. But as I say, I've managed to mitigate that with a whole host of like adapters and different things, which I think has managed it for the time being, but it's a constant worry of mine, and it's something I'm definitely going to think about if and when I go onto another TT bike. And that is it in a nutshell, my reflections of the Felt IA. Now, I have seen that Felt are bringing out a new model. I've seen Daniela Reef riding it, seen it on Instagram, etc. And it does look loads different to this bike, so maybe they resolved a lot of those things, but these bikes will be in the market for years to come. There's plenty of them and a lot of people ride them, so I'd be interested to know your thoughts about whether you rate or slate them. I hope that's been useful if you're looking or thinking about a Felt IA. I don't want to put you off because I'm going to keep this bike for the foreseeable future, definitely for this year. They're reasonably good value. We've seen the bike prices go up and up and up. I've been priced out of the market, if I'm honest, for swapping this anytime soon, but yeah, constantly things play on my mind. But I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button down below. Ride on, and I'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.